We'll start by taking a look at the back of the board, see what ports we have. I see PS2 mouse and keyboard. It's nice to know that they're still keeping the legacy ports around, especially since I still use a legacy keyboard. We have our coax digital audio and optical digital audio, always good to have. We have 2 USB 2.0 ports and an older FireWire port, and then we have 2 more USB 2.0 ports and another FireWire port. This is the newer mini FireWire. We have 2 more USB 2.0 ports and a Gigabit LAN port, 2 more USB 2.0 ports and another Gigabit LAN port. This board does have dual Gigabit LAN. It's pretty impressive. Here's our onboard analog audio. The usual array of 6 ports for front, left, center, speakers, microphone, input, subwoofer, yada yada yada. So let's look at some of the other parts of the board. Again, we have 2 PCIe X1 slots, PCIe X16, another X1 slot, a normal PCI slot, another PCIe slot, another PCI slot. So definitely a lot of slots. Now it should be noted that there is Gigabyte does offer a non-crossfire version of this board that just has 1 PCIe slot. It's a little bit more stripped down. This is that would be the Gigabyte EP45 UD3R. That's the stripped down version of the board. Everything's the same except I think it has 2 less SATA ports and of course only 1 PCIe slot. So anyway, we have our headers here for onboard audio. This is CD and TV, analog audio for CD and a TV card or whatever. We do have a header for serial port, so while there is no serial port on the back of the board, there is a header if you want to plug in a PCI or a bracket. So there is a serial port on the board, it's just not on the back of the board. You need a connector there for your header. Nobody uses a COM port anymore except for some legacy applications. And amazingly enough, there is actually a header for an old style parallel printer port. Believe it or not, that's actually a surprise to me because you don't see that on a lot of motherboards anymore, period. Now there's not one on the back here, so you'll definitely have to get a bracket from Gigabyte to support that. Anyway, we have our floppy drive connector, of course. We have another IEEE 1394 FireWire connector, so you can get an additional FireWire cable to plug in there. This could be used for any number of cases. A lot of cases from Antec have front-mounted FireWire ports, or you could use a PCI or a slot cover bracket with a FireWire port on it. So, in addition to the 2 FireWire ports you have back here, you also have an extra one you can use. So that's pretty good. Again, here's 2 more USB headers, USB 2.0 headers, so that's a total of 4 more USB 2.0 ports. That brings the running total of USB ports available on this board to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 USB ports available on this board. That's pretty dang impressive, I have to say. If you can look at these ports, I know those cameras kind of blurry here, but I don't want to stop it and go to macro. Oh, actually I will stop it and go to macro mode. Oh, that's much better. Now you look inside these connectors, and they're not only are they labeled on the outside, but they're actually labeled in black letters on the inside of the connectors, so make it pretty easy to see when you're looking down inside your case trying to make a connection. Now, of course, we have our front panel connectors. They are color coded, you know, and labeled, you know, fairly clearly. And my eyes are pretty bad, so I wouldn't be able to see that from outside the case, but I can definitely see it now with the case on with the motherboard sitting on the table like this. So now we come to our serial ATA ports. This is actually pretty dang impressive. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 SATA 2 ports. These are controlled or provided by the chipset, ICH10 chipset. This is an ICH10R chipset, so it does have RAID available. And then we have 2 additional serial ATA ports provided by Gigabyte's own proprietary chip. Actually, I guess if you had looked at this chip really closely, it's probably Silicon Image or, you know, Realtek or some name brand controller. I seriously doubt that Gigabyte makes their own serial ATA controller chip. But needless to say, you've got a total of 8 serial ATA ports on this board. Now, 2 of these can be used with your eSATA that actually came with the board we saw earlier, the eSATA bracket, where if your case has front eSATA ports on it, you can connect them there. So, again, we have, of course, we have a chassis fan connector for your case, you know, front fan connector, or whatever you want to use it for. This is actually a 4-pin PWM that's pulse width modulation, but you can use a 3-pin fan with it. You can control that in the BIOS. We have our 2 sets of 2 DDR2 slots. This is dual channel DDR. You know, DDR 1366 plus and actually 1600 plus with the BIOS update. There's our model number, EP45 UD3P. Here we have our single IDE connector. Gone are the days when your motherboard has 2 IDE slots. Now you're lucky to have 1 IDE slot. Most people don't even have IDE hard drives anymore, or most enthusiasts anyway. The only IDE device you're probably going to have is going to, you know, be your optical drive, if anything. And most of us are going serial ATA for those too. So, but it's still nice to have your IDE port. And you have your power connector, 24-pin power connector. I haven't decided whether that's the greatest place for it or not, but I've certainly seen worse. Have lots of power regulation circuitry. It does seem to be nicely laid out. Here's our CPU fan connector. Again, this is a 4-pin PWM connector, but it can be used with 3-pin fans. There's our CPU slot. You can see what I was talking about earlier with the 6-phase power regulation circuitry design. These are supposedly these are the coils, the ferrite coils. They're supposedly improved from previous versions, smaller process, better performing, but underneath these wonderful heat sinks here are actually the MOSFETs, the MOSFET chips, and that's where the real beauty in this board is supposed to lie. These MOSFET chips are actually supposed to be much improved. We'll see if we can get a view from the side here. Actually, you can't, but trust me, they're there. These are supposed to be much improved from previous designs and supposed to give performance that's equal or surpasses 8-phase and 12-phase power designs. So, we'll see. From what we're hearing on the various forums, the board does indeed deliver on that promise, and then some. I mean, there's some serious overclocking going on with this board. And of course,